Good morning. Let me make sure that we are level here and then we'll get going. It's Bernard Nomberg with another weekly episode of NOMBERG LAW Live. And as we do every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific, I try to bring you interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And today is certainly no exception. Good morning, Leila. How are you?
Good morning, Bernard.
Good to see you, and thank you for making a few minutes of time with me.
Absolutely.
I've got my friend, neighbor, lawyer, fellow lawyer, Leila Watson here with me this morning. Leila is a co-founder of the law firm Cory Watson here in Birmingham. It's a multifaceted firm that I'll let her tell you a little bit about it. But I brought Leila on not necessarily for us to just talk about the law, which that could be a little bit dry, but we're going to talk about so many other things that really make up Leila and what she does in the community. So I really appreciate you having a few minutes for me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be able to sit and talk with you.
My pleasure.
I didn't know the focus was going to be on me. I thought it was going
to... Well, we're going to talk a little bit about you. We're going to talk about the firm. But if you would, let's just start with you, Leila. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
All right. I was not born in Alabama. You can probably tell from my accent. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My grandparents were the Japanese immigrants after World War I, and my parents were born in Hawaii, and so I am second generation Japanese. Actually, third generation, I guess it would be Ichi-ni sensei. Third generation, but I don't speak any Japanese. I went to law school at the University of Maryland, undergraduate University of Wisconsin. It was at the University of Wisconsin, my final year in the social work program, that I decided to go on to law school. I was part of a, you just want me to go on?
Yeah, let's ramble on, learn more about you.
As a social worker, I was part of an interdisciplinary team at a diagnostic and treatment unit. And back then in the 70s, they used a term that wasn't a very nice term, I don't think, but it was descriptive. We took children at 5 years of age and under who doctors said were funny-looking kids and brought them to the DTU for evaluation, a diagnosis, and a treatment plan. And so as the social worker on the team, my job was to go into the home and meet the family and look at the home environment and pick up whatever information I could and bring it back to the team. I went to the home of this little boy. I still remember his name. His name was Joshua. He was living in rural Wisconsin. His mother gave me lots of information, including a package of papers. And the package of papers was a motion and a brief that had been written by a lawyer. The little boy was a member of a class action. And when I read those papers, even though I had never read anything like that before, I knew that that person who had written those papers was going to do more for that little boy than everybody else in the team. And so I decided I was going to be that person and help people like Joshua. So I went to law school. After law school, it was a less than stellar law school career. It was very bad, in fact. I got a job down here as a law clerk for Justice Jane Shores in the Alabama Supreme Court. And that's what brought me to Alabama. At the time, I'd never been to Alabama, so I thought, well, I'll come down here and work that one-year job and leave.
What year was that, Leila?
1983.
Because I know Justice Shores was a real pioneer in Alabama, and what a treat. That must have been a real experience working for her.
She was, and in fact, the Alabama Women Hall of Fame at Judson College is inducting her on March 4th, I think.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
And so I'm going to go for that. But she was best friends with Dr. Stonewall Stickney, who was very close to my father. And that was the connection. Dr. Stickney's recommendation for me was that he told Judge Shores that he had known me since I was knee-high on him, which was true, true statement. I clerked for her. Birmingham's a wonderful place to live. just wonderful city. Was in 1983 too. It continues to grow and develop, and I like to be a part of that. Eventually, I married a fellow from Talladega, Robert Watson, and we had 2 children, Cory Watson and Leila Watson. Lily is my legal assistant here at the office. She works in mass torts, and then my son, Akira, is a 3rd-year law student at Alabama.
Very good. And all 3 kids go to Altamont?
They did, yes.
I knew Lily, but I didn't know the older or the other kids
Yeah,
at the time, because I think my oldest daughter, Sydney, was coming up about the same time.
See, Lily graduated in 13.
Yes, so Sydney was a year behind her.
Yeah.
Okay. And then talk to us, how did Cory Watson come to be?
Oh, so after leaving the court, I got a job being a criminal defense lawyer with David Cromwell Johnson, who was partners with several other lawyers. At the time I got hired, it was, let me think if I can remember, Tipler, Johnson, Roden, Hayes, and Cory.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, and by the time I came to work the first day, it was just Johnson and Cory.
Oh boy. Things happen quickly.
But I still had a job. I was a criminal defense attorney with David Johnson, who was considered by many judges and lawyers to be the finest criminal defense attorney in the Southeast, some said.
He really had an outstanding reputation.
He did. And so I did criminal cases with him for 2 years. And after 2 years, went and told him that I did not like being a criminal defense lawyer. No offense to him, he loved it. It was, first thing was, I told him, I said, I don't like spending, 24/7 with criminals.
Yeah.
And he said, alleged criminals. I said, whatever. I didn't like it.
I can envision how that conversation went.
I said, I don't like night court. I was in night court with, between he and I, we were in night court 4 nights a week, probably.
Wow.
And so I didn't like night court. I didn't like arraignment docket. I didn't like being lied to by every single client. Anyways, long story short, I said I would like to switch to the civil side, the plaintiff side. And that was Ernie Cory's side of the practice at the time. So
I was going to ask you, was it a 2-sided firm at the time, and Ernie had the
pretty much
civil side? Yeah.
There were a couple other lawyers working with David on the criminal side, and I told him that I really liked doing the writing and the research, and I would continue to do his motion practice and his appeals.
Right.
I didn't have a problem with that, but then I wanted on a daily basis to switch over and work on the plaintiff civil side of the firm.
Sure.
And so after 2 years, that switch was made, and I worked on Ernie's side of the firm. And so, but I've been with Ernie since 1984. Because that's when I joined the Johnson and Cory. It was 1984.
Fast approaching 40 years.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So Cory Watson, today is our this year, 2020, is our 25th year as Cory Watson.
That's awesome. And we'll get to Cory Watson in just a second. We've got a bunch of folks who said hello. Mitch Jackson, a buddy of mine out in Southern California, trial lawyer. My dad, Joel, Simi, Cece, the folks over at North Central Alabama, Susan G. Coleman say hello. And we'll get to that in a minute or two. And we've got a question that we'll get to in just a minute. And they're asking about a particular medical malpractice case, Hope Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll come back. We'll get all of those. Thank you guys for commenting and letting us know that you're there. And let's talk about Cory Watson is now a very large, multifaceted, plaintiffs-oriented firm that is well known in the Southeast and other parts of the country, if not the world. But you started as a very small firm 25 years ago. How many lawyers, when you and Ernie partnered up, did you have at that time?
We had, I believe it was 5 lawyers, a receptionist, Charlotte, who's still my secretary.
Awesome.
Kim Clark, who is also still a secretary here, she's a legal assistant, sits next to Charlotte, and maybe one or two other legal assistants, an investigator. Chief Parsons was our investigator. It was probably maybe a dozen people. It was small. We were gonna stay small. We liked that idea.
Well, and that idea, I'm sure, you probably as you've grown, as all firms would, have struggled with the growing pains and figuring out, can we handle this type of law? Do we want to bring in these lawyers, other lawyers leaving? But I'm sure that over the years, the way that the two of you all have worked together, it's ultimately led to the firm that you have now. How many lawyers are part of your firm now?
23 lawyers, I think.
In what areas? I do want to talk about just for a little bit what areas of the law that Cory Watson focuses on, and then we'll move to what I think to be even more important than the lawyering part is how much that your firm and you personally give to the community. You pay it forward so beautifully, but we'll get to that in just a second. Tell us about what does Cory Watson do as a firm case-wise? What are you focusing on?
So we do all plaintiffs' work, and we do it in, I always think of it sort of in four different areas or four different types of lawsuits. One is the one that most people are familiar with, I think. For example, you have a car accident, you get hurt, so it's one injury, one case, one lawsuit, one trial. We do a lot of that work, and it ranges from, like I said, car accidents all the way to product liability, where you have your own lawsuit, your own trial. Then we have the multi-district litigation, which is, most of that is in the ones we do are in the area of pharmaceuticals and medical devices, where you have for example, right now, we're looking at Zantac, which has been associated with certain cancers. And so the question that we have a large population of people that have taken the medication and who, not everybody gets diagnosed, but we get a lot of clients who are diagnosed with the same disease, the same cancer. And so we file their lawsuits individually, but they're collected under one large umbrella, one federal judge. That's multi-district litigation.
Which a lot of people, if you don't really know how this works, most people may assume that that's also called a class action case. It's similar, but there are differences.
There are, and a lot of people don't want to do what I just described because they don't want to be a member of a class. Well, they're not a member of a class. The class action work that we do, which is the third area, there's one lawsuit filed and hundreds of people in one lawsuit, and they get treated pretty much equally. Whereas in the other, the multi-district litigation, there will be hundreds of lawsuits filed, all very similar to each other, and each plaintiff still gets compensated on an individual basis for their harm.
What's an example of a type of class action case?
Well, a lot of times it's automotive class actions where if you buy a car and it's got some sort of defective valve, they'll send you a notice and tell you you're a member of the class, and you need to take your car in, and when you take your car in and get the valve replaced, they don't charge you for it, and you'll get a coupon for like a free oil change or $100 worth of repairs, from a certified dealership. That's the most common type of class action most people run into. Okay,
so that's 3 of the 4. What's the 4th type?
Asbestos. We have a pretty large asbestos practice. Alabama, unfortunately, there was a lot of asbestos used in heavy industry, and so a lot of workers over the years were exposed to asbestos and are still getting diagnosed with asbestosis and lung cancer, mesothelioma, so we have, for about 10 years now, we've had a pretty significant asbestos practice.
And for those of you watching us live or may catch us on the replay, we're going to put a link into the show comments how to get to the Cory Watson Law Firm's website so you can find these different types of cases. And we could spend on each of these 4 different segments of the law that they handle. We could talk for an hour or 2, but that would be kind of a snooze fest. Nobody wants to watch 2 lawyers talking about the law, except maybe other lawyers who are watching. I do want to welcome Jordan, and we've got some other questions, Leila, that I want to throw to you. But I want to pivot now for a few minutes. You guys do such wonderful work lawyering, and I know so many of your lawyers here. I'm friends with them, do business with them, and really appreciate the work that they do. But I want to focus a little bit on the community side. You guys have a program, I think it's called Cory Watson Cares.
It is.
And we've been at a lot of the same events, particularly at Coleman and some other ones. But I want to talk about the philosophy that you guys have and why it's so important to the firm and to you personally to get out in the community and to give back.
I think, for me personally, it springs from 2 things. It started with the Coleman in 1990, I believe it's 1999, because we just this year in 2019, or last year in 2019, we were 20 years at the Coleman Race for the Cure. Ernie Cory, my partner, has been on the board of directors at the Coleman, the local affiliate. I've been there for them for any legal questions, any issues that come up relating to the race or just all the good work they do. And then we've been a sponsor at the race for 20 years. And it all started because in 1991, we were doing breast implant litigation. And roughly the first 100 ladies that signed up with us, saying that they were having health problems and they felt like they were related back to their breast implants, those first 100 ladies were the most loyal clients as a group that we had ever experienced. And they were all breast cancer survivors. Later, a lot of our clients were just plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery cases. But the first 100 or so were all breast cancer survivors. And when we finished the litigation in '98, we were very grateful. Like I said, that core group was amazing. And Ernie and I were very grateful to them. And so we decided that to honor them and their families, we would give to the Coleman in a big way. And that's how we became involved with the Coleman. The other reason that we do so much community work is I honestly and truly believe that as lawyers, that we are leaders. We are not just leaders in the courtroom, but we are leaders in our community. We are trained to be able to stand up in front of juries, but in front of people we do not know, advocate for a position that is divorced from ourselves. It's our client. So we could stand up and advocate for the Coleman, or advocate for Children's Hospital is another big beneficiary of our work. Child Care Resources was another one. We can stand up in front of a group of strangers, advocate for these organizations, and provide, just like in a jury argument. You give them the facts, you give them the emotional plea, you give them the results, you can give them data-driven results of if you spend your dollar here with this organization, what do you get out of it? What does the community get? I think that lawyers, because of the way we're trained and the education we're given, and a lot of it is also our personalities as lawyers, our role as professionals, and the codes that we have to follow. I do believe that we are natural-born leaders and that we have an obligation to not waste that and to go out into our communities and find those groups that need help and to lead them.
And let me pause you for just a second, Leila. You couldn't have said it any better. What you're doing is you're giving of your time and your expertise, your passion, and you're giving those people an audience. You're giving them a platform to be able to tell their story. And a lawyer friend of mine who's watching up in the St. Louis area, Tyson, does such a beautiful job in his community locally, and I appreciate you spending a minute with us, Tyson. I'm talking with my friend and fellow lawyer here in Birmingham, Leila Watson with the Cory Watson Law Firm. She's one of the co-founders. We're talking currently about some of the community-based service that the firm gives, and they do just such a wonderful job. As Leila, as you know, I'm intimately involved with Komen on a personal basis, and we see each other all during the year and during the race, and your firm really sets a high standard that our group tries to keep up, and we do our part, but it really is, it comes from one of passion, it comes from one of wanting to be there. And the Cory Watson Cares program, I know, is not just the lawyers who are involved.
It is not.
And it's not just the support staff, but it's also their families as well. And it really is such a beautiful thing to see so many people from a common group, whether it's a law firm or it could be any business or even a neighborhood or friends and family who rally behind someone who has lost their life or is currently undergoing their battle. And I think it's just so important, particularly as you said a few minutes ago, lawyers aren't just people who advocate in the courtroom or for your clients. I agree with you. They're leaders in the community. There's so many things you can do with your law degree and with your license. And it's not just representing people in cases. And I really admire that philosophy that y'all have.
Exactly, and really part of our lawyer's creed, I cannot quote it, but I've done the orientation for new lawyers for a couple of years. And part of the lawyer's creed in Alabama is to provide this service and to give voice to those that on their own have little or no voice. And so to me, that's part of this community service. And we like what you're talking about, I know what you're talking about. When we sponsor at the Komen, we invite not just our staff, but their families to come down and we'll register them for the race. And they can race as a family in the fun run, or they can do the 5K. We also have a group of them that we usually post halfway through the race.
That's right.
As cheerleaders.
You know what I really love about that is right before the race starts, and usually it's Janet Hall giving us the warm welcome, and the mayor is there and some others. But when you're standing in the group and about to take off, and you just look around, and how many thousands of people who are there supporting a common cause, it really is. That moment for me just makes it all worth all the efforts getting to that part.
It does. That and my other favorite part is I call it the Pink Ladies, the Survivors Walk. The ladies that are dressed in their beautiful pink and their beads and their feathers, and they get them together and they do a Survivors Walk. And it's hundreds and hundreds of ladies, and it's magnificent to see that.
It really is. And I want to welcome Mike Ermer, another attorney here in Birmingham.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for joining us for just a minute or two. Let's pivot again. We do a lot of pivoting in our talks here. It's not scripted. I want to go back and talk about some of your experiences, because you've really just dove into so many different things that have helped propel you, get you interested in certain subjects of the law. And I know you've talked about this in the past, some of the things that you've experienced that gets, I guess if it was a topic that you weren't familiar with, but you knew you wanted to take on this type of a case. You and Ernie made a decision, whatever it was, we're going to start doing this kind of case. How have you immersed yourself and learned, whatever the topic may be, to become experts in that area of the law?
That came from David and Ernie. As a brand new associate, when they started giving me cases, one of the first things they asked me to do was one of them had an appointment as a special assistant attorney general for the state of Alabama to condemn the land that became the connection of Highway 31 and the interstate system. And of course I knew nothing about anything having to do with that, including how to condemn land, the legal issue. I didn't know anything about the engineering and the reading of the diagrams, the valuation of the properties. And so they told me, they said, well, go meet with the client. Well, the client was the state of Alabama highway engineers.
Right.
So they taught me all those things. And then at one point they had a stack of malpractice claims they wanted evaluated. Again, so I had all these medical records that would have filled this whole table. And they hired a nurse from UAB, a friend of theirs, who came and spent the day and told me, this is how you put together a hospital medical record. Here's a book of abbreviations. These are places that you would look. This is how you could evaluate, see how the doctors and nurses evaluate the patient. One time we were doing, every plaintiff's lawyer, I should say, every plaintiff's lawyer loves a truck wreck. But I drove a Buick. I had never driven a truck. And so I felt like one of the things I needed to understand was, from the truck driver's perspective. And so we hired a truck driver who brought his truck over and showed us how to drive a truck.
So you kind of did a ride along. And learned how it was.
All sorts of things like that. Along the way, every time something came up that it involved, if it was a case that involved something that we didn't know anything about. Like I knew how to change a fuse at my house. I didn't know how the improper fuse, I didn't really understand how that would cause the house fire. I didn't understand how you wire a house. My husband was an architect. He put me with one of his electrical engineers who was working on a house they were building, and he took me through some of the steps to help me understand that. So some of it's just, rampant curiosity on my part.
And it's, what it also is, it's nothing they teach you in law school.
Nothing.
It's not the real world practice of plaintiff's law. You have to immerse yourself in whatever the topic is. But I've got one that this may give a smile to your face. And I've heard you tell this story before. It involves a restaurant over in the old East Elm Mall, or Eastwood Mall, excuse me, about having to keep the doors open because you had to have people there so you wouldn't be in breach of the lease.
Right.
You remember doing this?
I do. I remember talking to you. I forgot you were there. So I represented, it was a Japanese steakhouse back in the 80s. And it was located over at the old Eastwood Mall. It was a large space at the Eastwood Mall. The owner of the mall wanted to convert the mall into something more profitable. But in order to do that, we had a fairly long lease. He needed to buy out our lease or catch my client in breach of their lease. And then he could terminate the lease without having to buy it out. And so I told the clients, I said, at all costs, do not breach your lease. Well, their biggest struggle was just being able to open the doors because the business had fallen off because the mall was in disrepair.
Right.
People weren't coming out there anymore. And so one night I stopped by. They were open, barely, but they had no waiters. And so they were struggling to stay open and take care of customers. And I told them, I said, well, I used to wait tables. I waited tables all the way through high school and college. And in law school, I can wait on a table. I can do this. So I took an apron and took the waiter's tablet and waited tables and kept them open that night. Anyways, ultimately we were successful. They did buy out our lease.
I was going to say, these are all great examples of being a lawyer, but it's outside the box. And more importantly, outside the office. You're out in the community and you're doing things to represent your client. You're learning how to do those things. I did have a request earlier about the Hope Johnson medical malpractice case. Does that one ring a bell with you?
Oh, yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about that one? Because we're getting close to the end of our discussion with Leila Watson with the Cory Watson law firm here in town. If you have any other questions or comments, just go ahead and throw them in there. But tell us about that case.
Hope was a 20-year-old Auburn student who had a steady guy. They were going to get married. So she wanted to get put on birth control. She went to an OBGYN down near Auburn. Her mother went with her because the mother had a long history of having blood clots with every one of her pregnancies. She had had a total of 4 pregnancies and had blood clots in her legs. And actually with Hope, that was her youngest child, She had a pulmonary embolus, so it was a blood clot in the lung, which can be very dangerous, can be fatal if it's not caught. And so the mother went and told the doctor about her history, and they decided to test Hope to see if, it was pretty clear the mother had a genetic factor that made her blood clot easily. So the question was, does Hope, did she inherit it? And the way to find it out is through blood tests. They drew the blood work, and when the blood work came back, it was reported to be normal, and so Hope was put on birth control pills. 3 weeks later, Hope is getting ready for exams, and she is struggling to ride her bike and get to class. She has chest pain when she's breathing. She goes to an urgent care facility and tells them what her problems are. They diagnose her with pneumonia and bronchitis, give her an antibiotic, tell her if she gets worse to come back. Well, 2 days later, she is much worse. She has severe chest pain, really struggling to breathe. She returns to the very same urgent care. This time, when they do her vital signs, they are screaming. The vital signs are screaming for Hope to be put into the emergency room. Her heart is beating as hard as it can beat, and she is not circulating oxygen. She's not oxygenating her blood. That's what the vital signs would tell the physicians, except that Hope is discharged. It is, I think she was seen by a physician, but I think that day, it was his first day. He saw 90 patients in 12 hours.
Wow.
And was overwhelmed. It wasn't right, not making excuses for him, because I sued him after all. But there were a lot of lessons in all of this. Anyways, she wasn't treated. She was discharged home. The next morning, her dad was on the way down to sort of be her Uber driver, pick her up at home, take her to class, and pick her up from class and take her wherever she needed to go, since she wasn't feeling well. Her brother stopped by to see her. He's the one who actually called 911. And by the time her dad got there, Hope had been taken to the hospital and had passed away of a blood clot in her lungs, undiagnosed, untreated. So lots of things. The first doctor she went to, the lab reports came in, and the doctor looked at them and read them, just opened them up. The way digital stuff comes in these days. Hit the PDF and it pops open, you read it, you close, you get the next one. Of the 5 records, one of them was positive, but she read them all as being normal. So she missed it. I bet today that physician never reads a record once.
No,
Probably not twice. Probably has read them 3 times now. Lesson learned. Because if it had been known, Hope never would have gotten the birth control prescription, I don't think. The lesson so anyways, we tried the case. The jury, we settled with that doctor, the first physician, the OB. When we tried the case in Auburn, it was against the urgent care and its physicians. And our jury returned a $9 million verdict for the death of Hope Johnson, which spoke, it delivered a message to urgent care centers, which is, it's okay to see 90 patients in a day. I'm not saying you can't do it. But if you're going to see 90 patients in a day, then be prepared for 90 patients. Take care of 90 patients. Be flexible. Be able to bring in the staff and the physicians and whatever else is needed. And if you can't do that, then you need to tell the patients that you can't do it. And I think that is what the $9 million verdict spoke of to the community.
Clearly it hit home with the people who live in that community as well.
It was, I think so too. Brett Turnbull and Nina Herring here in the office. Brett, we started the case with Brett and I were together here. He's since established a Turnbull law firm. But
and he's been a guest of mine on this show.
He's great.
Brett's a good friend.
Yes.
And a great lawyer.
And so he and Nina and I tried the case. And our clients had an opportunity to settle the case
Mhm.
and chose not to, because they felt strongly that it was important for the community to hear the evidence and the testimony. They thought it more important to try and deliver a message about how an urgent care should take care, safely take care of the people that go through those doors looking for medical help.
Well, Leila, thank you for sharing that story. I know that it's a sad story, but it's one of pride for you and the attorneys to have represented that family and hopefully change how practices are done for urgent cares, not just in the Auburn area, but hopefully all around. They see the news and what happens when you become overloaded. I could talk to you for the next 2 or 3 hours, but we both have got a lot of stuff going on today. So I want to thank you for your time and sharing your story with us today.
Well, thank you for having me and giving me a platform to speak and talk about some of the things that I value and I think are important and some of the things that I love.
Well, I've been wanting to reach out to you for some time, and I'm glad we finally found the time today. Guys, as I said earlier, we'll put in the comments section the links on how to get in touch with Leila at the Cory Watson law firm here. And this will bring us to a conclusion of this episode of NOMBERG Law Live, as we try to every week on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. I try to bring to you interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise, and Leila certainly fits that bill in many, many ways. So thank you again, Leila.
You're very welcome.
Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next week.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.